All right, on this week's episode, we have Ryan Atkinson. He was an undrafted player out of the University of Cincinnati, ended up getting signed, making it all the way to AAA. It's a great story. Check it out. Here we go. We now welcome on to the podcast my good buddy, Ryan Atkinson. Ryan, thanks for coming on the show today, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. More than fortunate to be here.
So I know, we've been hanging out a little bit lately and, we played against each other in college, and I thought it would be really cool and fun and even inspiring just to kind of have you on the podcast. Most of the time on my podcast, it's usually a lot of coaches, a lot of college coaches, professional coaches, and I think you're the perfect guy because you have the blend of both. Like you're coaching, pitchers mainly. You're mainly a pitching coach right now and working with a lot of top level high school players. You have your own gym, but you're also a former player too. And so, like, I think maybe just starting out, my first question to you is, undrafted out of college, and just going through your numbers, you had some control issues when you were in college, and then I don't know, something must have clicked because you went from walking like a decent amount of guys to a couple years later just being lights out dominant. So, like, what happened?
There's many answers to the question. It's just, one thing, it could have been easy for me to just kind of like stop and give up, right? And so it's frustrating walking guys. If you're a pitcher of any sort, softball, baseball, whatever the case is, it's probably one of the most frustrating things in the world. Like I remember going many times where I'm 0-2 in a count and I'm walking a guy.
Hmm.
So I think the biggest, in general terms, without going in a rabbit hole, is like just a lack of confidence of like putting guys away, lack of confidence of knowing you're better or you have the advantage over the hitter. Because I think a lot of times pitchers give hitters a lot of credit. And I'll say this as a pitcher, like hitting is probably the hardest thing in baseball because the pitcher starts with the ball. The pitcher knows what he's doing. He's in control of what he wants to do. And hitters are reacting. And, if we're making it easy on them, then yeah, they look really good. But at the end of the day, they're in a more tougher situation than we are as pitchers. We essentially just have to execute.
So it was mainly a confidence thing for you. Like you would get a guy 0-2 and then you might throw a ball or two and then it was, oh, here we go again type of a scenario.
Yeah, it's like you kind of have your memories of like, man, I can't put guys away because I don't have my put away pitch or I don't have a put away pitch. And so I would more or less just like lack of confidence and not having that dominance on the mound.
So I guess the next question, the lead up question is going to be, how'd you get that confidence?
Um, you know, what leads to confidence is just creating success, and just kind of figuring it out. Figuring out what works for you and whatever that little answer is, and like running with it. And it takes time off the mound too, with a lot of mental practice, which we didn't do a lot in college. And so, like you said, in college, like through that time frame, it was kind of just like scrambling. And then when I got into pro ball, um, I think it was just more or less seeing other guys do it because clearly at the time I didn't have that answer to put guys away or to limit and minimize my damage. And so it was really studying and observing how other guys were doing it, and then maybe just speaking to them and like hearing how they talk about it, hearing how they act or respond to situations. It was like it was a mentality of like being untouchable. It was a mentality like I'm coming after you. It was a mentality like I'm the bulldog. Um, I'm coming at you rather than I hope he doesn't touch this pitch or I hope he gets out, more or less. It was more of like a positive influence, seeing how other guys would do so and take charge.
So by you just talking to those other guys like that, their confidence kind of rubbed up on you.
100%. And just watching the game, like, growing up, you can speak to this. It's like coaches always say, pay attention to the game, pay attention to the game. But granted, we didn't really know what that meant. It was just like,
Yeah.
okay, and keep talking to my teammates.
Right.
And then now it's like, as we got older, it's like every pitch is so important to analyze. Not only like other pitchers, but like even the hitters, how they respond to pitches in certain situations. And like those are all repetitions that doesn't cost you a dime or energy or effort that can be very beneficial in how you play the game.
You mentioned earlier about the mental side of the game and how you started to utilize some different techniques in pro ball and you didn't really do it as much in college. Like what would be an example of something you started doing to help you on the mental side?
There's a few things I did. From the start of my day, it was first thing out of bed was the meditation aspect. And granted, I started in shorter time frames just because it was challenging mentally. And really, what happens through meditation, which a lot of people might not understand, which is okay because I didn't, was really just learning to sit with your own thoughts, sitting with your own emotions, and really understanding yourself, gaining awareness of yourself more than trying to figure out an answer on why. Like there is no definite. It's more or less learning to be okay with what is. And one quote I'll always carry with me that I learned from a strength coach of mine from the Diamondbacks, his name is Michael Acosta. One thing he would always tell me, I think he learned from somebody else was, life is the way it is, but only always. And so, like, sitting with that just kind of made me wonder. It's like life is always going to be the way it is, no matter what you do or say, because the way it is what it is. And I always pondered with that because there is no answer. And the second you try to find an answer is the second you try to become definite to something. The second you try to become attached to that answer and find reason within that answer. And so, like, for instance, if I'm on the mound, and I'm getting off a tangent here, but if I'm on the mound and say we're in a situation and it's a tight ball game, there's a runner on the second, and I'm trying to refrain from that runner from scoring. Say the guy I'm facing gets a hit, that runner scores. How do I respond to that situation? Because at that time, the situation is what it is. And the second I try to find reason with that, is the second I become attached to that scenario. And the second I become reactionary to that rather than just saying, okay, moving on and getting back to what my true focus is. And that's just being better at the next pitch.
Mm.
And so bouncing back, what I practiced from a mental standpoint was like meditation in the morning, really sit with my thoughts. And towards the back end of my meditation, I would always try to do some sort of visionary practice, like practicing me in a situation, since we're talking about baseball, practicing seeing myself playing in the big leagues, practice myself seeing success in the big leagues, practicing myself facing a Hall of Fame hitter. Really taking the threshold to the top, to the best of the best. And then I truly believe when you practice towards seeing yourself beyond measure, anything underneath that is going to come more acceptable. It's going to come more expected, if you will, in a way that you're meant to be there. Not caught by surprise, like, wow, I didn't know I was this good. It's like you've always been that good, you just didn't know it yet.
Mm.
And I think that's a big challenge and a hard challenge for the benefit that a lot of people will have a hard time seeing just because it's unknown, because they haven't broke through the barriers of that success, that threshold of talent, that threshold of confidence, you know. And so, yeah, the meditation, the visionary practice, start days, I would do journaling beforehand of goals such as first pitch strikes. I would put no walks. I would put win the ball game, last 5+ innings. All those smaller details. Whether I did it or not, that was my focus. And say I go 4 innings or I didn't win the ball game, it was okay. Let's not react to it and get mad at ourselves. Let's learn and understand what we could have done different. Just like studying yourself, allowing you to be a little bit more aware of what you're doing and continuing to practice towards that each day.
That was all really good stuff right there. I got a bunch of questions for you. My first question that I have is how many other pitchers are doing what you just described you were doing? Like how many in the big leagues, professional baseball, like high level pitchers, like how many other guys are doing that, would you say?
Like currently?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure obviously you know a lot of guys and play with a lot of guys, end up going to the big leagues. I mean, how many were doing that kind of stuff or are doing that today?
Yeah, I think meditation and breathing is becoming more of a practice. A lot of teams are that I know of that are getting, I don't know what some teams label them differently, but like a breath coach could get some sort of meditation coach or a psychologist, a sports psychologist, things like that. And I think everybody kind of creates their own avenue of what they think might be best for their organization. But I think players are tapping into it more individually than organizations as a whole, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, I think that's probably the greatest tool you can have is the meditation, is the breathing practice, because what that does is one, you don't get tired from it. And that's something you can exercise every single day and create benefit, not have to rest and recovery and take a day off.
How long was it before you started seeing results from that? And I wouldn't say results necessarily like, you were playing better, putting up better statistics, but you were in different situations that maybe you were in the past and you weren't reacting the same way. Like was it a month? Was it weeks? Like 6 months? How long of a time period was it? Because I think that's where a lot of people maybe misunderstand is they want that instant gratification right away. And to me, that this is kind of something that's more like a lifelong skill, if anything.
Right, right. And it is something you can take with you forever. Like today, I still practice. But I saw probably results within weeks.
Mhm.
Um, and it became more of it developed me into a greater self over time and months. So being on the mound, being more dialed in, being more focused on what I'm doing, which then leads to confidence. And when you develop that confidence, because you understand yourself more, you understand what you're trying to accomplish, and so therefore that confidence builds into results. And the results builds into consistency. Consistency leads you into higher levels, development, promotions, things like that, which allows you for greater success, I think, over time.
Was there anything different from a mechanical standpoint that you changed from college to pro ball? Because I mean, within a 2 year period, I mean, you went from, having an okay, finishing up, having an okay senior season, and then just 2 years later, I mean, you threw 141 innings, 167 strikeouts, in your first full season of professional baseball. I mean, that's like video game numbers. So what was like that? Was there any difference from a mechanical, or was it just all the mental side?
Obviously, mental played a part, but my mechanics in college compared to pro ball were a complete 360. In college, I didn't move well. I didn't move efficiently, if you will. I didn't really move connected. I was a strong guy, but like joint mobilization, I was stiff. Arm was slow and long, so there's where like the velocity came into play and like jumped up in pro ball compared to college. Mechanically, it was just really fine tuning. Not that I made like a huge dramatic change. It was just fine tuning how I moved, which then comes back into the practice of mobility on a day to day practice. And I look at mobility practice just like the breathing practice. It's like you can always work on something each and every day, and you create your own intensity behind it, whether or not you're going to be sore from it or you want to do it more to feel good to kind of prime yourself up for the day. And so I would use it as like a warm up or a pre pitch day, pre mound day, or I would use it at the end of the day to kind of restructure, reconnect my body from my feet to my hands or my hips to my shoulders. Is really keeping the body connected and creating that muscle memory. So then it translates on the mound, which leads to me not really having to structurally change my leg kick or structuring, shoulder tilt, glove side, whatever people want to talk about. It was simply just moving better. And I think that cleans up the look of your mechanics. And then the biggest thing on top of that, I will add, was enhancing my arm pattern, um, my arm path through the window of the shoulder and, whatnot. I just got a quicker arm, and the arm speed what led me into velocity spike, increased. And then that led me into more efficient hand position, which allowed me to have more depth on my pitches, greater movement, um, better spin efficiency, which then created more success at the plate because I was more consistent and more dominant.
How were you able to find all that out? Was that just through once you got into pro ball, doing a lot of testing from a technological standpoint, analytics? Like how'd you not know that in college and then know that within a 2 year frame, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah. So to be honest, I think we spoke on this a little bit. Like, I'm not against biomechanic measurements, data analytics. I'm not against that, but it works for some people from a mental standpoint and it doesn't for the others. I'm a big feel guy, so how I feel while not really measuring anything to numbers, even though it's like hard data, so it makes sense. But again, going back to what I spoke to earlier, was just like analyzing other players, watching other players and observing like why are they, because I was a guy who worked hard, and I think you could probably ask almost every teammate of mine through my whole career, and I'm not here to fluff that, but I was probably the hardest worker or one of the top hardest workers on every team I've been at. And so every team I've been on, it's just I just worked hard. And but there was guys that threw harder. There was guys that had nastier pitches, guys that had better numbers. So I'm like, all right, if I am like outworking them with effort from a physical standpoint, why am I not producing better than they are? And so, like, being around guys in pro ball, and I'm speaking to pro ball mostly, is where I learned this. Is like I'm watching guys who are throwing 95, 96, 97, 98. And I'm just like sitting down at 90 to 92, touching 93. And I'm just like, man, like, I just don't understand. And so it was just studying and studying. And next thing you know, it just hit me. And I think you don't get to that point unless you're really putting in the reps and time watching and analyzing to understand. Because you can only do so many things without understanding. But the second you understand, it opens up more windows and avenues for you to create. And so I was just watch guys, and the arm speed thing is what hit me. And I worked on that in the fall league in 2017, and that the fall league was when my velo jumped up, and it was, like I said, it was 90 to 93, and then next thing you know, I'm 94 to 96, 95, 97, and I'm just like, it was just the flip of the switch, and I didn't have to do much. It was just very, very rewarding to know and feel that I was capable of doing that.
Why did you stop playing so early?
Yeah, interesting question. So, not by choice exactly. So obviously COVID happened. That was March of 20 when we got sent home for spring training. And 2 months later in May, just kind of speed things up, they called and released me. I was hoping that the minor league season was going to come back, and that year nothing really happened for the minor leagues. Essentially shut down and then created another taxi squad roster, if you will, for the big leagues. So they had created a 60-man roster. Unfortunately, I wasn't a part of that. I think every organization had their own reasons, which is understandable. They got guys they invested money in, guys they prioritized as a prospect at, a certain younger age. Not that age plays a big part, but they just had other investments and other guys that they wanted to see develop. And I feel like, personally, in my opinion, I feel like that was kind of like the route a lot of teams were probably taking, so they could get their reps in, keep them in shape and on their process point of development, if that makes sense. In 2020, that was, and so I was training that summer into the fall, going into the winter of 2021, and I got myself ready by March, mid-season form, more or less. The velo was good. Off-speed stuff was working well. And so I was ready for a spring training. Talking to a few teams, and nothing ever fell through. And so at that point in time, I just recently started the business, and it was pretty stressful because, you start a business, you're, trying to develop and grow that and learn and understand how to operate a business, and that's a whole nother world, and definitely not easy by any means. And so the lifestyle was pretty challenging to do both, and I just kind of went with the reins of where I was in life and put baseball aside for a little bit as far as the training, and then I was kind of stubborn on what I wanted if I were to get a contract, because I had a bunch of indie ball teams contact me, and based on my resume, I was a yes to double A or triple A, but wasn't really agreeing to go back to indie ball, even though that was probably the route I was going to have to take just to get some innings under my belt again. And so that was more of a probably stubborn approach. And so that's kind of trickled out and just kept going on with business. And that was kind of the end of it naturally. So I never really said I retired. Still to this day, it's am I capable? Yes. I could probably get up and do that within a month, but yeah, that was kind of just how it happened. Life just happened, and I kind of went with it.
Do you regret not going for it again?
I wouldn't say I regret it. If today I said I was retiring, I would be very, um, let's see, I would be very happy and appreciative for what I've done in the game of baseball and the time that I had, the people I've met, and the opportunities I had. Because at the end of the day, that's all you can ask for is an opportunity. And I couldn't be ashamed for any of that just because of my story, undrafted, basically had to work my way, for every inning I had, just had to earn. So I can't really say I regret, but if I was a guy who got drafted and had a signing bonus and did all that, I'd probably think a little differently. But more or less, I wasn't supposed to be in the shoes I was in during that time of my life in pro ball, and so I can't really say I would regret any of that.
What was it you graduated from University of Cincinnati, undrafted, and then you stopped playing, you got a regular job for like 12 months and then just went to a tryout, got signed from indie ball, and then you were signed by the Diamondbacks like a couple weeks later. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll kind of give you the quick rundown on that. So yeah, graduated college in 15, and then 3 months spent basically the summer going into the fall, not working or anything, and started at a local gym doing personal training. And then at the beginning of 2016, I got a job at a local hospital, a little bit more towards my degree, but nothing too specific. And did that. So I did personal training on top of the salary job. And that was from January of 16 till June of 16. I came home one night after a shift, emailed the Frontier League on a Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, I get an email, hey, we have a tryout Monday. So within 5 days, I had to be prepared. And I haven't picked up a ball since my last conference game of college in 2015. So we're looking at about 13 months. And so I go to that tryout, uh, do well, obviously, face four batters, four strikeouts. That's where the Diamondback scout originally saw me. And then one of the independent baseball teams signed me, which was the Evansville Otters. They signed me that night. I go into the hospital the next day, tell the director, like, hey, I got this situation. She didn't even think twice. She said, go and do it. I had an opportunity to play pro baseball again, or to play pro baseball. She said, go and do it. Don't worry about anything. Just go. And I was like, wow, okay. And so I met the team on Thursday. Two appearances out of the bullpen. Then 8 days later, the Diamondbacks bought my contract. Signed July 2nd of 16. Go to Missoula, Montana. Long story short, finished the year with the Diamondbacks in rookie ball. I go to Instructs at the time, which I don't know if they still do that or not. Do you know if they do that?
I think it's just different by each organization, and I think sometimes they call it something different. Like it's a little it's just based upon each organization.
Like a little camp, yeah.
Yeah.
So went to Instructs in 16, and I was like so new to everything. So I was like, so am I going back to spring training? Like I had no idea how it worked. Spoke like a true rookie. And so go to spring training in 17. Um, get lucky breaking camp because one of the fifth starters in low A had a blister, and so he was held back. This was 2 days before spring training was up. They tell me I'm the fifth starter in low A, so I go to low A to start the year. Um, Things start kicking off, and I just ran with it and go from low A, got promoted to high A. They sent me back to low A, not from a performance standpoint, from a business standpoint. If you understand, it's prospects time to move up, if you will. And so went back to low A. Then 2 weeks later went to double A. Then finished out the year in double A with 8 starts, and then was invited to the fall league. And this was that first full year you were talking about earlier. Go to the fall league in 17, and then big league spring training in 18, all double A in 18, big league spring training in 19, then double A, then promoted to triple A in 19, and then 2020 spring training and COVID happens, and that was kind of the gist of that.
Man.
And
Fun ride though, dude. I mean, a great story. Like, I mean, isn't that crazy? Like you from undrafted, I mean, having like a really good professional career within a few years. I mean, I think it's really cool, and it speaks to kind of perfectly to what we're doing a lot now. I know you're coaching baseball now and working with a lot of pitchers and coaching at St. Xavier High School, which is in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so I'm sure a lot of the lessons learned that you had and a lot of the experience you had throughout this entire time, you're able to now pass along to, these high school pitchers. So, what's that been like now that you're back coaching? I shouldn't say back, but you've now started coaching for the last couple of years. Like what has surprised you maybe from a coaching standpoint? Like, is it a lot harder than you thought? Is it about the same? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
I truly like from a coach's eye, and everybody has their own approach on this, but really just having patience, because putting yourself in the shoes back in when I was in high school, I was nowhere near what some of these kids are now as far as talent level and as far as understanding of the game. And so when I see that, I'm just like, wow, like very appreciative for where they are. Um, because when I know that about them, I know their ceiling is much higher than what mine was. And not to relate everything to me, but to understand the potential that they have in front of them. Granted, the curve of development at a younger age is growing. Guys are getting better earlier and getting more efficient with their playing skill at a younger age. But it's just really being appreciative of where they are and what's yet to come that they haven't even tapped into is just really cool to know. And so just really learn to be patient with the development aspect of that because one thing you just can't rush. You can't rush what yet they can't do, you know? And so it's really just finding cues for them to understand how to get there and continue just to practice and nip at it and talk about it and express to help understand what's working, what's not working, how can we adjust. And the more you can do that and just talk about it, I think the more things will click rather than forcing a kid or a player's mechanics to move a certain way or to look a certain way is just not sustainable because everybody's mechanics are different. But it's can you perfect and fine tune how you move and what you do. So it's not really changing a whole lot, but it's more or less changing the approach, the adaptability, and just getting smarter with the game from a mental standpoint and really understanding that aspect to help develop the higher level.
What's something that maybe that you're doing now with your pitchers that you think is going to play big dividends for them down the road? Like I know you mentioned before, like, you're not necessarily you're not into the biomechanics, but you're more so like feel like. Are you now getting into some of that stuff in case that you have a pitcher who's has more of an analytical type of mind and maybe they connect better with understanding the biomechanical information?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely important to understand how that stuff works. Understanding how to read the graphs, understanding, what numbers are good, what numbers are not so good, and how they can impact that certain player. But really, I think a computer can't pitch for you. You know, a computer can't tell you how to throw a pitch. And so, if you become so reliant on those numbers or what those data sheets are telling you, then you're really losing the concept of like who you are on the mound. Because at the end of the day, you step on that mound, you have to be able to do that yourself. And so, I think it's a great tool to have, but there also needs to be a balance of understanding so you can really understand yourself and just have that awareness because when you're on the mound, pitch by pitch, like you got to make adjustments. And the second, I was told this in the fall league, actually, it's like what a lot of GMs and managers and organizations like to see is like how quickly can you make an adjustment on the mound? And so if I'm spiking a fastball, it's like, well, one, I shouldn't be doing that in the pro level, but two, how can I get it back in the zone? You know, like guys in the big leagues, and this is like there should be no other mindset to any players. Like, put yourself in a big league situation. College, like everybody wants to get to college, but at the end of the day, everybody's goal dream is to pitch in the big leagues or play in the big leagues. So why not even put your mentality starting there? And so, yes, you need to learn fundamentals, have a foundation, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to make the adjustments on the field. And if you're not capable of doing that in a timely manner, then your learning curve is slowing down. And there's other guys that are passing you up because there's guys that will make adjustments pitch by pitch rather than at bat per at bat. You know, that's 3 innings in between before you make an adjustment. You know, and so I think getting back to the coaching aspect is my goal is to help the players understand who they are as players, helping them understand their strengths, helping them understand what's going to work for them and how can they grow and develop the other side of things, such as their weaknesses and where they can improve. Yes, we use the measuring tools to understand that, but as a reliancy, I'm not the biggest fan of that aspect. I just think it's a great tool to have to get measurements and readings so you can kind of check and balance your work.
Yeah, and I think and the other thing is if you can't locate the fastball, if you can't locate, a breaking ball and you're walking so many guys, and I've seen this now a lot, especially with guys at the college level, none of that really matters, right? I mean, you look at the College World Series, they're not putting guys out on that mound who are walking the house. And those are guys who are throwing mid to high 90s sometimes. So I definitely agree with everything that you're saying right there. From a practice design standpoint for pitchers, is there anything that you like specifically like doing or structuring the practice in order to emphasize some of the things that you're talking about?
Um, let's see. You talking about like with coaching the players in high school or just like in general?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so at the high school level, it's like kind of gotta, I don't want to say dumb down, but you gotta first understand like where they are as a player, where they are in their learning curve. And then my approach is every every day is important, regardless if you're on the mound or not. And so having routine is a big deal. And stretch is stretch. But I think every player needs to have their own individual routine because every player is individualized. And I think the second you have a routine shows that you actually understand what you need to do. You understand what work you need to put in to get better. And being able to show up and do that consistently on a day-to-day basis is a big deal, I believe. And leading into like daily catch and preparing your arm to play catch. Playing catch is one of the biggest times for you to learn. That's where I learned how to enhance my arm speed. It wasn't plyo balls, it wasn't towel drills. Like those things help. But at the end of the day, you're not pitching with a towel, you're not pitching with a plyo ball. So it's really utilizing, again, just like the data, it's like utilizing those tools to help your arm feel good, to help your arm move cleaner, if that makes sense. Then can you go and repeat that with a baseball? And so I think having that focus when playing catch, whatever the art is that they're working on, can you practice that while playing catch? And a lot of guys, as you know, in high school even, it's like play catch. It's like it's just have fun, joke around, just toss a ball around here and there, and then call it a day. And I just think it's important to really put the focus and effort into playing catch. and putting into priority of what you're working on that day, whether it's the feel of your curveball, playing short catch, the feel of your changeup, at 90 feet or 150 feet, or can you hit a guy in the chest at 150 feet with your fastball? Can you flip a guy a curveball to his chest at 60 feet? And so I'll speak on this since the name has just continued to grow with Zach Gallen. Zach Gallen was just recently traded to the Diamondbacks when I was in big league spring training. And I just, even before he came to the Diamondbacks, I admired his work and his skill. And then when he came over in spring training, I was like, oh, this is awesome. I love, I'm in the same locker room as him, and I'm like, I'm trying to watch every second of this guy. Granted, I'm 3 or 4 years older than he is, and here I'm trying to learn from a 22, 23-year-old. Like, that just goes to show, like, it doesn't matter who and where you are from and what you are at your age, but like, there's always something to be gained from somebody. And so when I was watching him play catch on one of his start days of spring training, he always worked on his grips in very short, close distance. And he would just repeat and repeat and repeat efficient delivery, efficient spin on his ball, hitting a guy in his chest consistently with every pitch. And we're talking 30 to 60 feet short catch. And I never got to talk to him about it. I was just kind of a shy guy at times, and I kind of observe and kind of, know my place in the room, if you will. But I was always observing. And I took that upon myself to kind of reason with it. It's like, this makes sense. Like, if you can command your pitches and have feel for your pitches at, 30 feet, 20 feet to 50 feet to 60 feet, if you can repeat the feel, then it shouldn't matter what distance you're at, right? Like, if I'm trying to repeat my curveball and hit a guy in the chest at 20 feet, why can't I repeat it at 60 feet? And that was what I believed in. A lot of people might think that differently. It's like, hey, you should be able to, if you can hit a guy in his chest at 120 feet, then you should be able to do it at 60 feet because it's further distance. But I look at it as like, that's a stressful practice, and now you have to apply effort to get the ball at 150. And so a lot in practice, or a lot in pitching, at least, and playing overall, it's like, I look at things of how effortless can I be and repeat what I'm doing. Because the second you apply effort is the second you tense up, the second you impact how your body moves. And so how can I de-stress? How can I relax my body to repeat efficiently and move efficiently as best as I can? And so that's why I believe the 30 feet, the 20-foot practice of throwing your pitches and finding your feel at 20 feet, you should be able to repeat that same feel at 60 feet with a lot less effort than if you were to practice it from 150 to 60 feet, if that makes sense.
What's the time frame at those shorter distances? Like, let's say when you're working with your high school pitchers, what would be the amount of time slotted for them to warm up and toss?
Just the duration of playing catch.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it just depends on what your day is. If it's a light catch day, then let's spend little time finding your field, just moving your arm, because it might have been a day after a bullpen or day after game or whatnot. Because the recovery aspect is what's most important at that point. But if you're ramping up to get onto the mound, it's like you got to understand your body, have awareness of your body that day, in order for you to be intense on the mound. But if you're trying to be intense right away without knowing what your body feels like, without knowing release point, and I'm not talking like seeing release point, physically knowing release point, is just, again, coming back to feel. Like, you have to feel and repeat release point each and every pitch. And so that's why progressively enhance the effort over time, but keep it as light as you can and challenge yourself to be as light as you can. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And then question, the time frame, like I said, depends on the day, but up close and personal, playing catch from a short distance, I think it's all feel. Like, once you feel good,
move on.
move back.
Yeah.
But if
You
you
don't, yeah, yeah. That's a good point. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be in an enormous amount of time. Obviously, you're coaching high school baseball and you don't have unlimited time. And so I think that's I'm glad you brought that up where it's, hey, you don't have to do it for necessarily a long time. It's once you feel it and once you're feeling good. And, I think the main thing is just focus. Like, are you just going through the motions or are you focusing in on every single throw? And if you focus in and hone in on every throw, you don't need to throw as many.
100%. And you can just by without having a conversation, you can tell the mindset of a player based on just how they're taking action.
Mm.
If they're spending a lot of time playing catch at 90 feet, and then going out and coming back in, whatever the case is, if they're spending a lot of time with little focus, you're gonna pick up on that. But if a guy is like 5 throws at 30, 5 throws at 60, 10 throws at this and that, and like having a structure, you're going to pick up on that too because that's routine. He has a purpose with what he's doing. And you can see that without having conversation. And I think just as a young athlete, you don't really know that your coaches know that. You just because you've experienced it or you've been around it long enough to know, okay, they're not locked in. Okay, they're working on something where they're not.
I said this on I don't know what episode it was. It was a couple weeks ago, but previously I had Doug Lauman on the podcast. I need to actually bring him back on and see if he wants to come back on again. He's been a scout for over 40 years. You should actually meet him sometime. He lives in Northern Kentucky, and he used to former scouting director for the Chicago White Sox, and so a ton of experience. His son is now a scout, I believe, in the Mariners organization, and he said on the podcast, he goes, I'll be honest, I was either in or out on a player. I mean, we're talking, again, scouting director. So he's looking at the top very first round pick, second, and all the top guys. So I was either in or out on a player after warm up. He said, very rarely would my opinion change during the game. Like, maybe after a couple at bats or even on the mound. He said, usually I was in or out on the guy after they warmed up. And, I would stay for the game and watch that, of course, but my gut reaction would always tell me yes or no after they warmed up. And so I thought that was really interesting. And it a little bit kind of what you're talking about right now, too, where, even as a player, I mean, looking back, I mean, like, geez, that never even crossed my mind that someone could be watching me and B, what am I actually trying to accomplish when I'm warming up? Like how, you know what I mean? And you said it was structure and things like that, how important that is. But that just really resonated with me. And so when you said that, it kind of, I started thinking about that again.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And definitely as a young player growing up, like I would never put a thought that I was getting crossed off or getting a check mark to my name based on how I warmed up. Like, I mean, I did have a band routine warming up before I pitched or played catch, but like a lot of guys don't, and a lot of guys don't understand that. And it's a simple, it's a simple telltale based on how a guy takes care of himself. If you can't take care of yourself with the necessary detail, with small things, then why would you ever take care of the necessary things that are going to be much more impactful to the team? And that's why I think it comes back to like in the game of baseball, I think having that individualized routine in practice, quote unquote, being a little selfish, I think that's totally okay. Because at the end of the day, it's like when you're on the field, your teammates are relying on you to take care of your job. In the time frame of you not taking care of yourself off the field, then why would you be able to do that on the field? And I just think that's a simple telltale, and it's like you don't even need to have a conversation.
Great point. What's your vision for yourself for the future? Like what do you want to do? I know you got your own business right now, and at the end, we'll talk about that. And you're working with pitchers, coaching high school baseball, have a lot of experience yourself as a player. Clearly you have a lot of self-awareness. You understand, what made you you, and now you're trying to help other players, pitchers with that. Like what's your vision? Do you have a vision? I know you talked about visualization earlier. Like what are you visualizing now?
That's a big question. Um, it's I wouldn't say I have the big vision in order yet. Um, it's been a challenging transition from playing and then getting into the business aspect, the coaching aspect. It's a lot of change, and you always hear about athletes in general like struggling getting from the field to off the field and having a career, having a life in general. I'm not saying that I'm struggling, but it's just having a such a clear path as you did of having a dream of playing big league professional baseball in the big leagues. It's like that's something you've had for 20 plus years, 25, 26, 27 years. And then all of a sudden, like within a year, it's like switching over and having that 20-year vision is like not the easiest thing. Um, Interest level, different story. Definitely love the aspect of the human performance development. Here at my gym, Performance House, that's the ultimate goal with the business is really for myself learning science, doing the research, putting in the time and effort as time evolves of how the human body can perform, how well can you challenge the body to grow and develop into whatever you desire. If you're a marathon runner, other athletes, of course, um, and just really tapping into bettering oneself and putting that in front of others, whether they are athletes or not, but working with individuals who desire that. And I think just from the business aspect, like it's so fulfilling to really see others succeed outside of like my own success that I've had and like that I desire to move forward. It's really putting others first and like helping others in human development, human performance, whether it is like I said in a sport or some sort of physical activity they desire. Aside from that, definitely want to work with athletes in their sport performance and development over time, whether it's high school, college, or even at the professional level. Um, Obviously, they're performance coaches all over the country and including the world. So, I mean, it's really just getting around the right people to put yourself in front of that crowd to work with high level individuals such as, and I think I will over time. I'm definitely confident I will. It's just a matter of time. But really spending the time on the human development, human performance approach, and the research behind that and the science around that. And then from the coaching side, um, depends what opportunities in front of me. I firmly believe I could coach at a high level, college or professionally. I don't know what that road looks like, how to get there. That's probably just conversations I have with somebody. As far as like committing to that this second, I can't say that I am or am not. It's just kind of taking one step at a time, day to day. Just really letting those pieces kind of fall together when the time is right. Because, like I said before, it's like you can't force good. It's just the practice of it and the process of it that's going to allow that to naturally flourish over time. And I'm just trying to appreciate the day to day operation of that.
Good stuff, brother. What's a way someone can get in touch with you? What's the best way someone could contact you?
Yeah, so obviously outside of my personal phone, email is
We won't put
good.
that on the internet.
Yeah, we don't need to do that. Email, social media handles. I'm more active on Instagram than anything. Twitter I get on, but as you told me, I need to be more active on there, so I might take your word on that. The Instagram handle is Ryan_Atkinson 14. And then my Twitter handle, I don't even know. I'd have to look that up.
So Instagram, we'll put the social media handles in the show notes. But
Yeah.
it was good having you on, brother. Again, man, glad you're doing well now, and awesome story, awesome career, and appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate our friendship and where it's headed. But yeah, thanks for taking the time. And I think you're doing great things with your podcast and bringing on a lot of great people. So thank you.
Appreciate it.